It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Hey, good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host here this morning. Why, sorry I got started a minute late there. I got carried away reading a story. You know, I read so much every day. I read so many articles and stories and different issues that I get, sometimes I get carried away and I don't realize the time. So, good morning to our friends in America and those who are listening. That includes you guys over at the NSA. You can learn something if you just ride with us for the morning. See a ton of folks out there streaming on our live website at americasvoicenow.org. Thank all of you for joining with us. Let's see, I see folks over in Fort Wayne, Lincoln, Nebraska, Riverside, Ennis, Texas. Boy, Ennis is coming on every day. I love you guys down there in Ennis, Texas. Thank you. I see some folks over there in California. Riverside, I guess that's California too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you guys down there in Riverside. I can't see where you are, just the city. I'm not the NSA. They could probably see where you are, but they know everything you do anyway. Remember, you are wearing and carrying your personal tracking device. NSA sponsored, right? So, all right, we're going to touch on a bunch of topics this morning. And the first one we're going to wrap on is Common Core and how it is our common enemy. And I say that because I don't care where you stand ideologically on the political fence or the political road or whatever analogy you want to use. What I'm saying here is this. Common Core is bad for our children. And I don't care whether you are a liberal, a conservative, a patriot. I don't care whether you are black or white or red, all over. I don't care whether you are straight or gay. I don't care whether you are a Christian or a Muslim or an atheist or an agnostic or a Buddhist or whatever you are. Common Core is bad for our kids. I went to a meeting yesterday in Willow Springs. We're going to talk a little bit about it. It's interesting. And I've bumped up against the same stuff in my own town. But it's disturbing. And I think the state of Missouri, my own home state, for those of you that don't live here, there is legislation currently pending. In fact, it's up for a vote on Wednesday, and so we're going to drive some activity to that vote. All right, our second topic, Obama's lawlessness continues unabated. And I say that because yesterday he announced, that unilaterally, again, in a dictatorial fashion, he would be extending the mandate for small businesses between 50 and 99 employees because he says so. It's in diametric opposition to the law. The law clearly states that it cannot be changed. He hasn't gone to Congress to obtain that change, which is the required method under our Constitution to make changes to the law. And the more this goes on, the more acclimated we become. And so the question really is, at what point will Congress or the courts or ultimately the American people say, that's enough? Our third topic, America, prepare to defend yourself. This is going to be a controversial one, and it is for a reason. The truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, that if you look around you, everything that you see going on within our nation is leading to a point at which we will no longer have any further options by which we can resolve our dilemmas. The reason I say that is because at this stage, what's happening in our country is moving at a pace which is quite honestly scary. And I've been on the record for quite some time predicting that this is going to come down to a fight, a physical fight. We're going to talk about it. Why, how, and under what circumstances. And the fourth topic is the Ohio National Guard has training that involves a right-wing Second Amendment terrorism plot. And they actively are training for this scenario. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, because what that tells us is a lot. It reveals the details of their thinking, which is critical for you to understand who your enemy is. And if you don't believe that you need to know who your enemy is, then I encourage you to go back and read Sun Tzu's Art of War again, or perhaps for the first time. But know your enemy is the number one adage, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're talking about a physical conflict. This could be a political conflict. It could be any kind of a conflict. You must know your enemy. In fact, this and that adage and that principle extends beyond politics. It extends into business. It extends into a contract negotiation. It extends into purchasing a car. You are adversaries until you come to agreement. So, the ways to find us, and you can always email me, by the way, at mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's mike@americasvoicenow.org. You can always catch us on our listen line at 415-325-0725. That is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week listen line where you can simply dial in and get your own personal private listen to the program on any phone. It is a service offered to us by Audio Now, free of charge. Thank you, folks at Audio Now. I greatly appreciate that. You can find them, by the way, at audionow.com. You can simply dial in with any telephone and listen to the entire program for that given day, the latest program. How cool is that? 415-325-0725. If you'd like to give that number out to as many friends as you like, feel free. Please distribute it. In fact, graffiti it all over the walls. You might get some people who would just listen. You never know. If you'd like to call the show, you're welcome to. 417-204-5141. 417-204-5141. That'll ring in to the board here. You can also call us and leave messages on our message line at 417-204-5130. It's 417-204-5130. But I prefer email because I don't get that phone line every day. That's just a message line. And I would prefer email. You can, again, mike@americasvoicenow.org. So let's get into our first topic because this is an important one. Common Core is being implemented in my state. It's being implemented across the country with no discussion, no review, no oversight. And basically it is a set of standards which they're calling state standards, for those of you that are new to the Common Core issue. They're not state standards, they're federal standards. In fact, I was at a city or a school board meeting yesterday in Willow Springs, which is in my county. And someone had requested an opportunity to speak to the board about it. They are already implementing Common Core in Missouri, even though no one's explained what it is. DESE, which is the Department of Education in the state of Missouri, and secondary education, elementary and secondary education, DESE, they have been literally opaque. When we talk about transparency in government, DESE is anything but. And they've refused to acknowledge and discuss what's really happening here. The governor himself sits on the board of a company called Achieve, which is deeply involved and ingrained in it. The governor has instituted Common Core in the state of Missouri without ever going before the state assembly. And the school boards are being hammered, frankly, by local citizens who say, we don't want this here. There's pornography in the reading material. The math standards are a joke. The kids can't figure out exactly how to do the math problems because they're so ridiculously foolish. The science and history, which is not even supposed to be part of the program, is being shoved down our throats. This is a indoctrination program, not an education program. So, in typical school board fashion, you have to apply in writing to go and speak to the school board, which I find disturbing to say the least, because frankly, those people work for you. And to have to request an opportunity in writing to speak to the school board as if you're some peasant going before the royalty to be heard and to beg their help, I find disturbing. Nonetheless, I went to this meeting last night, and a gentleman stood up who had requested an opportunity to speak. The board granted him 10 minutes. I know some of those men on that school board. In fact, I'd gone to a Common Core and anti-Common Core meeting in that town not so long ago, I don't know, a couple months ago. I know some of those men on that school board, and I know they listen to this program, and I hope they're listening this morning. And I got to tell you, I don't think the school board's 100% for it. But there were two gentlemen that were leading the program and they were relatively gracious to the guy who was requested that he have an opportunity to speak. But the whole feeling was one of, we owe them deference. And I disdain that. In fact, I find that insulting. We don't owe them deference. They work for us. They're elected. And we have given them a limited power of attorney. And I emphasize the word limited. Because in giving a school board a power of attorney, essentially what you've said is, for the purposes of education, we grant you a power of attorney that is limited in its scope so that you may make decisions that are in the best interest of our child, relating to things like budgetary issues and teacher contracts and things like that. One of the questions that came out last night from one of the audience members was, how much leeway does the school board actually have in stopping Common Core, assuming that they determine in their infinite wisdom that Common Core is not a good thing? And the gentleman who was chairing the meeting actually was candid about it and said, I'm really not sure. Because the state has a way to hold the school boards hostage, essentially through funding, right? I mean, same way the federal government does it, the states can do it to the school board. And I admire his honesty in that statement. At the same point in time, and remember, when you're talking about a school board, you know, most of the folks who go up to a school board in towns that are small know each other. I mean, many of them grew up together, went to the same schools together, et cetera, et cetera. And so there were a couple times in which I spoke, and one of the reasons I did is because I noticed that a lot of the other folks that were sitting there, and I've experienced this in many other types of public environment meetings, were unwilling to voice their opinions in some cases, or, you know, the school board makes it clear you cannot speak unless you're granted permission and granted an audience, right? The 10-minute audience that they grant you. And with all due respect to America, and my friends and my neighbors who I see at various public meetings, at what point in time are you going to sit there and stand up and speak for yourselves? I mean, I understand that you want rules, especially in a public meeting. By the same token, you know, if the rules are designed to quiet dissent and to end public discussion in which people can be heard, parents can voice their concerns, and redress their grievances with their government, including your school board, which is a governing body, then quite frankly, you know, you're not under any obligation to pay special deference to a public meeting. You can be disruptive as you want to be. Now, I made a statement last night in which I said that if the school board members, my point was simply this, and many of them admittedly said, we don't know everything there is to know about Common Core, and we're studying it now. And my argument at that point was, well, if you're studying Common Core at this late date, when they're already implementing it, you've, for all intents and purposes, abdicated your responsibility to these students, because you should have known about Common Core and put a stop to it, or at least drawn a conclusion about it long ago. I mean, this has been implemented, or being implemented. I shouldn't say that. This is being instituted within the state and has been for years now by the guy who was heading the chair's own admission. He said, well, they've been instituting this for years. Okay, so why is it that you're only learning about it now then? I mean, with all due respect, I understand that budgets are important. I understand that planning the board member retreat is important. I understand that planning for things like teacher negotiations are important. But honestly, the curriculum overrides all of it. The value and the educational input that has on the students overrides every other concern. That's like saying, well, we're generals in the Army, but our primary concern is not necessarily fighting. Stop right there. If you're a general in the Army and your number one concern is not how to fight the battle, then you're in the wrong place. And quite frankly, 2 of the board members took offense when I used the word abdicate. They've abdicated their responsibility when I made that phrase. In fact, at one point in time, I stood up a second time to say something. And the guy who was chairing the meeting actually said, "You're finished." And he stuck his finger out at me. "You're done. You can't hijack the meeting." Well, with all due respect, sir, I wasn't hijacking the meeting. I was stating for the record what everybody else in the room was thinking. And the room was packed. Probably the one of the most well attended school board meetings that they've had in some time. The truth is that he was attempting to use his power to silence the dissent because he didn't like what I said. The truth is that he didn't like the fact that I made a statement which wasn't against his best interest or the school board's. And I meant no personal injury to any of these men or the woman who was sitting on the board. They're human beings and they're just like us. But what I am going to say is this. When he said to me, "I can have a police officer come in here and remove you." Ladies and gentlemen, that's a threat. And it's a threat not because I could be removed, because he's silencing my voice. Because he's silencing the thing which I am doing, which is educating those around me. I asked the board, how many of you were at the Common Core meeting? 4 hands went up off of 8 or 9. Well, where were the other 4? And you'll notice that the 2 who took the most offense were not in attendance at that prior Common Core, anti-Common Core meeting. Towards the end of the presentation that the one gentleman made, who was against the Common Core standard, he said, "I ask," and he said it in a very almost a pleading way, for the school board to hold a meeting where they could hear from the public in a larger venue so that the public could attend, and that they would be able to hear from the public. And the guy who was chairing the meeting at one point said to me, "This isn't a town hall meeting." Well, with all due respect, this guy was asking for a town hall meeting, and their response on 2 separate occasions was, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, "We'll take it under advisement and we'll look at maybe whether or not we should do that." With all due respect, it's not up to you, it's not optional for you to make a determination as to whether or not you will or will not hold a public meeting. And I said at one point openly, hey, listen, you work for these people. Let's understand each other. You can threaten me with having me removed by a police officer, but you work for them. The truth is, Missouri is coming up for a vote on Common Core tomorrow. If you live in the state of Missouri, you get a hold of your rep and you make it clear. If you're anywhere near Steve Cookson, he sits on the Education Committee. And you make it your business to get a hold of Cookson and you let him know, under no certain circumstances, in no way, shape, or form should Common Core be implemented in this state. Frankly, you should be going to your county commissioners and looking to develop a resolution that will bar the school boards from being able to implement this. Because if the school boards have been tainted or corrupted, or if they're just unknowledgeable, then you and I each have an obligation to stop this in its tracks. Until there is true empirical evidence about Common Core, it needs to be stopped. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, I'm going to talk about this Obamacare lawlessness, but I'm going to finish this topic on Common Core. So stick with us for a few minutes. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, I want to wrap this up on Common Core because there's a couple of points I want to make, not the least of which is that, school boards, and especially the leaders of them, have a vested interest in continuing their own. There was one mention, and I'm going to bring this up after the break. There was a mention at one point about the fact that anecdotal evidence of what these kids are seeing in tests is they get these pop-ups that ask them about personal information, like what's the phone number of your house, and how much land do your parents own, and how much money do they make. It's data collection. And the guy who was chairing the meeting, I'm going to talk about it after the break. I got to just read these commercials real quick. But I'm telling you, stick with me until after this break because this is an important aspect of this thing. All right. Make sure that you visit our friends over at Wits End Classic Barbershop, 417-372-2027, where you can get a great haircut for $10. And they also do a hot lather shave, straight razor, the whole 9 yards, hot towel, real old-time and old-fashioned style. And it's very, very enjoyable. Nice treat for your guy or your significant other, your husband, your father, whatever. Patriot Cigar and Tobacco, right behind Wits End Classic Barbershop. Slip in there and get yourself any kind of tobacco product that you're interested in. Great place if you want to have a bachelor party, some kind of a sporting event, even a bachelorette party. And if you're having a baby, get in there and get your It's a Boy, It's a Girl cigars. 417-257-1776. The law offices of Jason Henry, also on the square in West Plains. He handles state and federal cases, criminal and civil. And he also does personal injury related to automobile accidents and family law, including divorces and custody issues. You can reach him at 417-256-4100. That's 417-256-4100. Make sure that you see our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. They are, every day, they have a lunch special, salad bar, as well as a pizza bar and a pasta bar. And then on Tuesday night, kids eat free. Tuesdays and Thursdays, $5 days. That means you can go in there and for $5 get a great lunch. Make sure that you see our friends over at the battery station at 417-257-7799, where you can find all kinds of things from batteries to bolos. There's nothing that these guys don't carry. You can find their website by going to batterystation.com. You can also call them at 417-257-7799. And then make sure that you see our friends over at the Express Mini Marts 1 and 2. The first one is up on the corner of 14 and 63 in Old Granny's Cafe building. They've converted that over to a beautiful facility, and they have a drive-through at both locations. The second location is right across the street from the City Pool in West Plains, the one that's on People's Park. Swing in there, drive through the drive-through, let everybody know that you heard about them on America's Voice Now, and make sure that they understand that their advertising is working. If you are interested in advertising, email me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. We'll be right back. Yeah. All right. I want to finish this Common Core topic before I get into Obama and the lawlessness of what he's doing with the Obamacare mandates. At that meeting last night, there was a discussion about the fact that these computer tests that the kids take have a pop-up that, opens up where they're required to answer questions. And there's a couple of things about the Common Core program that are problematic in the data collection aspect of it. And, some of these questions that these kids are asked are extraordinarily intrusive. Like, how much money do your parents make? How much land do you own? Is there psychiatric problems in your house? What kind of physical, mental, and physical ailments are present in your family? I've seen some of the actual questions myself from a company called Pearson that distributes out these questionnaires. And I've spoken to my own school board about it and was given an answer that, well, they pay the school for every one of those that gets turned in. And I said, you got to be kidding me. You're selling our kids information for some budgetary nonsense. Don't you get enough money from the taxes and the state and the federal government? I mean, we spend more money on the education in the United States than any other nation in the world. Insulting. And she assured me that Common Core was not bad. That's not true, Ms. Thompson. Not to mention the fact that... So anyway, this parent said, these pop-ups come up and you can't move past it unless you answer. They're asking for the parent's phone number. Now, I spoke to a woman last night who said her third grader actually was required to put in a phone number before she could move forward. And when the kid came home, she said, Mommy, this is what happened. And her mother said, well, what'd you do? She said, well, don't worry, Mommy, I didn't put in our phone number. I made one up. That's the truth. And the school board members said, or the guy who was chairing the committee said, well, I can't go by this anecdotal evidence. I'm paraphrasing here. I can't remember his exact phrase. But basically what he was saying, I can't go by this anecdotal evidence that he said this and she said that and you said that, you were heard through a grapevine that somebody else said this. And I stopped him and I said, excuse me, sir, with all due respect, the reason why you have never seen these tests is because they're given online. And you, as the school board, nor the teachers, nor the principal, nor anyone else in the school system is allowed to see the tests. The reason that you're not allowed to see the test is because they don't want you to see what's in it. Their argument is that if they allow the teachers to see what's in the test, they'll just teach to the test. And this forces the teachers to actually implement the full Common Core curriculum because they don't know what the kid is going to be tested upon. The truth of the matter is they weren't aware of that. And that's disturbing in and of itself. Secondarily, these teachers will be graded on how well the kids do on the test. And since they don't know what's going to be on the test, they're required to implement the entire Common Core curriculum, even if they disagree with it, because they don't know that part might be on the test that they'll never see as a teacher. Now, how ridiculous is that? Furthermore, the issue here of Common Core and the way that it's being implemented, everything is done, compartmentalized, right? So it's kind of like building a nuclear weapon, but this group does that and this group does that, and the two never really quite figure out what's going on. And this one's building tail fins, and this one over here is building a detonation device, and this one over here is building the electronic components, and none of them are aware they're building a nuclear weapon. And the truth is, this is no different than that. You are sitting there compartmentalizing our education system, and you are making teachers teach. And by the way, they were not aware of the fact, and if they were aware of it, they kept it hidden. I'm asking you, school board, did you keep this hidden? Did you know that only 15% of the Common Core curriculum can be modified by the local school board? 15%. The other 85% is copyrighted and must be taught exactly, verbatim, word for word, the way it's presented. Now, it's interesting because Common Core requires all tests to be taken electronically. There are no more paper tests. And since you're talking about children from kindergarten all the way up to high school, what's even more disturbing about this is that kids who cannot type will not naturally do as well as on a test because they don't have mouse skills and they don't have typing skills. And these tests are timed. And admittedly, in the meeting, the one teacher spoke up about the fact that in Missouri, the STAR testing results, which are the ones that are taken on computer, were invariably anywhere between about 5 and 10% lower than the paper scores for reading. It's interesting. Why? Because, one, these kids are struggling. And they're struggling to learn how to type and how to use a mouse while they're trying to memorize and remember what they learned in the class. The truth of the matter is, not everyone has small motor skills that are suited and well suited for typing and mouse clicking and so forth and so on. And that should not be held against these children. Because the concept of Common Core is to identify who's a good worker for this and who's a good worker for that. The real purpose of Common Core is to develop and create automatons who will do as they're told, who will be just smart enough to push the buttons and flick the switches and push this and turn that. The problem here, and what I said to the board, which got this guy so hot, was until Common Core, and first of all, until you as a board have fully understood Common Core and what the implications and the correlations and the consequences, unintended and otherwise, are fully known to you, then you have an obligation to err in the favor of the student. They didn't like that. One of the people spoke up and said, "It appears that you've already made your decision, and this meeting is to justify that." And he was right. He was not an eloquent speaker, but he said, "I sat there and I watched you, and I watched the jugular vein in your neck pulsing, and I see how angry you get when someone gets up underneath your skin, and that tells me what I need to know." And that man, bless his soul, he said what everyone in the room saw, but couldn't put into words. God thank him for standing up and saying just what needed to be said, because it was true. The truth of the matter is, until Common Core has been fully evaluated, let some other state experiment with their children. We'll look at the results and make a decision later. But Common Core should be ceased and halted and desisted from implementation until we know empirically that it is good. Quite frankly, we've been experimenting with our children through indoctrination programs for the past 70 or 80 years. Has our education truly, really gotten better? No. So it's enough with the experimentation. Go take a test that your grandmother took in 8th grade. I guarantee you won't pass it. You know why? Because we don't teach that stuff anymore. We don't teach writing and reading and arithmetic. We don't teach educational retention of information that you read. We don't teach to read. We teach to read not for the purposes of learning critical thinking, but to read manuals. Because manuals are what automatons need, not critically thinking adults. All right, that's enough on Obamacare. Common Core, which is not vastly... By the way, good point somebody made to me in a phone call later on. This sounds like Obamacare. We got to pass it to see what's in it. And I have to tell you something. We should not be opening up our children's minds, lifting up the top of their precious little heads, sticking a blender in there and hitting the power button. Let's let somebody else experiment with it. New York's been working at it for quite a while. Look at their results. They're atrocious. Get a hold of Steve Cookson today. He sits on the Education Committee. And let him know, in no uncertain terms, that Common Core should not be implemented in the state of Missouri. Okay, so Obama comes out yesterday, and in an unrelated statement, this was not related to Obamacare, but it was very indicative of his thinking. He says he was over there touring, of all places, my friend, Tom, and your friend, Thomas Jefferson's property over there at Monticello. And he was walking the president of France around. This is the guy named Hollande, who passed a 75% tax on anybody who makes $1 million or more. And they were looking there, they were standing out there on the terrace, and they were being given a tour by the tour operator there, the person who runs the Monticello Memorial or Museum. And she pointed out that Jefferson loved to admire the landscape from this particular area of the house. And POTUS said that he'd like to take a look. And he seemed delighted, according to this report. This is the pool reporter from they trail the president around riding his coattails, writing everything he does and says. He seemed delighted to, quote, break the protocol because you're prohibited from going out there. Quote, "That's the good thing as a president. I can do whatever I want," he quipped. And then he walked onto the terrace with his guest and Ms. Bowman, the president of the Monticello Foundation. See, the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, that the real thing that is related to that particular statement is the fact that the president has this way of thinking that is antithetical to liberty and freedom, that is antithetical to the leader of the free world, that is antithetical to the concept of Americans who truly believe that a president is there not necessarily to dictate the rules to us, but to do what's in the best interest of the country. But this particular jackwagon thinks, I can do whatever I want. And no, I don't want to hear anything about how I'm supposed to be deferential to the seat. I am deferential to the position of president. But this guy, quite frankly, is not an American citizen. He doesn't have a legitimate birth certificate. He came over here. He's violated our laws. He is violating the law right now. And frankly, I'm sick and tired of waiting for somebody to stand up and do something about it. The truth is that until the nation is willing to stop this guy, we are going to continue the slide down into tyranny. There is an avalanche of regulations that are still on their way due to Obamacare. Most Americans don't even realize that. They think this thing has been implemented. Did you know that the Obamacare individual mandate laws have not even been written yet? Now, let me rephrase the word because it's not laws. It's rules and regulations by HHS. And they haven't even been written yet. The Obama administration has to finalize 28 additional regulations. 28 additional regulations. Remember what I've said to you in the past. Administrative agencies, they are extra constitutional in their foundational charter, if you will. They have no constitutional authority to exist because we never delegated our power of attorney to Congress to then have them subdelegate that power off to who? What? A bunch of unaccounted, unelectable, nameless, faceless bureaucrats who don't take an oath of office. Remember that, folks. These people in HHS, they don't take an oath of office. What does that mean? That means that they are not swearing an allegiance to do what's best by the nation. Quote, and this is from the American Action Forum. In total, these 28 paperwork burdens total more than 45.7 million burden hours. For perspective, it would take more than 22,800 employees working full time to complete the new paperwork. Using the average wage rate in the United States, these regulations will cost $1.4 billion annually for companies to be in compliance, and individuals. I'm sorry, not companies, the individuals, because this is the individual mandate alone. And that's just the individual mandate alone, ladies and gentlemen. To make matters worse, the president came out yesterday and said, well, we're going to delay the employer mandate, the one for employees between 50 and 100 workers. We're not going to delay it for the ones below 50 workers. These are the ones where everybody has been actually just lopping their employees off to get below 50, right? Any company that's anywhere between 49 and 59 or 69 employees is cutting them dramatically. Or they're taking all of their full-time employees and making them part-time, and therefore they avoid the consequences of the mandate. But now he turns around and he says the small business between 50 and 99 workers, we're going to push that off another year. Under what authority? Under what authority does the president make a unilateral statement? You know, Krauthammer, who's a commentator on Fox News, and I take umbrage with Krauthammer at times because he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. But he came out the other day, and you know what he said? He said, this is the kind of thing that we hear in a banana republic. This is the kind of thing that dictators do when they are up for a phony election that's coming forward, and they're trying to make things look good for the purposes of the election. And ladies and gentlemen, this is no different. That's essentially what this is. This is about making Obama look good for the 2014 elections in the eyes of these small employers and their employees between 50 and 99. Boehner actually said, once again, the president is giving a break to corporations while individuals and families are still stuck under the mandates of his health care law. And once again, the president is rewriting the law on a whim. If the administration doesn't believe employers can manage the burden of the law, how can struggling families be expected to? This continued manipulation by the president breeds confusion and erodes Americans' confidence in him and his health care law. We need fairness for all, with relief from Obamacare for every American. With all due respect, Mr. Boehner, that's not sufficient. The simple truth is that the man has again violated the law, and you, as the leader of the House, who actually have the police power to have this stopped, have neglected your duty. You have abdicated your responsibility to the American people, the citizens of the state of Ohio, and the nation as a whole. The truth of the matter is, we've gotten to the stage here where this reminds me of the guy who draws the line after line after line after line in the sand. And he keeps saying, well, if you cross this one, I'm going to have to do something really serious and drastic. And the bully steps over the line. And he draws another one and he says, now don't you cross this line because I'm telling you. And the bully pushes him back and steps over the line. And he draws another line. I could go on. You see, the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, as a nation and as governing leadership, they and we have ample, empirical, documented, and overwhelming evidence that this president is operating in a manner which is lawless. And that means he has disqualified himself from the presidency. When someone breaks the law in the United States, we as a nation, and generally as a society, believe that that individual has a right or can lose their rights. So, as an example, if someone were to drive drunk, the general consensus in the public is, if you've driven drunk, you deserve to lose your license. If you got caught robbing a bank, you deserve to go to jail. If you got caught selling drugs, you deserve to get imprisoned, and you deserve to have your money taken from you, which was a part of the drug business that you were in. So why is it that the nation would sit aside here and allow a president to break the law and say, there are no repercussions, that he has immunity and impunity for his treasonous action? And mark my words, treason it is. Because treason is defined as doing that which is against your own nation, aiding and abetting the enemy. And in this case, the enemy is not, some physical enemy. You can't sit there and say, well, he snuck some secret over to the Russians. You can't say, he gave away some secret and he helped and aided the enemy win the war. But mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, what this man is doing to our nation is no different than the end result of that treasonous action. Now is the time. This is the place. And Congress, you are on the public stage. The lights are bright. The curtain is risen. The spotlight has been flipped on. And it is shining on you, John Boehner, you, Cantor, you, McConnell, you, Reid, Schumer, Pelosi, you, 9 robed justices. We are the audience, the American people. And we are sitting here watching this play move forward directly in front of us. We're watching in rapt attention and horror. We all sit here and wonder, why don't they do anything? When will they take action? When will they cease this activity? When will they stop the dangerous behavior? The truth of the matter is, I don't think they'll ever stop it because they don't want to stop it. They've been paid or co-opted or coerced or corrupted or whatever. But these are not the actions of rational people who are operating in the best interest of the population that they allegedly represent. No one who's intellectually honest, no one who's utilizing critical thinking skills can conceive that this is appropriate behavior on the part of the individuals who have an obligation to cease the behavior of a man who is turning our nation into a banana republic. The ball is in Congress's court. The ball is in the court of the Supreme Court. John Roberts should be penning an opinion now that says this president has operated in a lawless manner and has violated the constitutional prohibitions on the executive branch. And therefore, I move as the Supreme Court Justice to request that the Sergeant at Arms of the House arrest the President of the United States of America and charge him, remove him from office, and cease the dangerous behavior. When we come back, we're going to talk about how America should be preparing to defend itself. Because I have to tell you, folks, what I just said is never going to happen. And it's time that we drew that conclusion, recognized exactly how far down we have slid. I don't believe there's anything at this point, any political solutions that can solve our problem. And so my strongest recommendation to you is wake up, be aware, and prepare. We're going to talk about that. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Please join us every day, Monday through Friday. While you're at it, visit our friends. Make sure that you see our friends over at Battery Station at batterystation.com, 417-257-7799. The Pizza Hut in Porter Wagoner Boulevard. Excellent family night on Tuesday nights and Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can go over there for a lunch special. Jason Henry Law Offices, where you can get all of your legal issues handled, whether they be state or federal, whether they be criminal or civil. Make sure that you visit our friends at Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop, 417-257-1776. By the way, Jason Henry's office, 417-256-4100. My apology. And then our friends over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. Swing in there and get yourself a haircut, 417-372-2027. And our friends over at Mini Mart Expresses 1 and 2, one on 14 and 63 in Old Granny's Cafe. Make sure that you use the drive-thrus at both locations. You never even have to leave the car in this lousy weather. Second one is located in the heart of West Plains, right across the street from the City Pool on People's Park, and that is also on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. If you're just joining us, you're catching us live mid-show here at America's Voice Now. You're always welcome to catch us live Monday through Friday Central Time from 8 to about 9:45. We stream the show on our web and on our Spreaker podcasting services, and the show gets broadcast and streamed live on a bunch of other locations and websites. You can also catch us live, or not live, but recorded on Big Country 99.3 in South Central Missouri. Excellent radio station. Program plays from midnight till 2 a.m. on 99.3 on your FM dial. Outstanding group of folks over there, and I very, very much appreciate and am honored to be on that station. We've reached a point here, folks, where we have to look at the reality of what's happening to our nation. And I say that because, there's an old quote from Ayn Rand, and I know there's plenty of people out there who will say, yeah, how do you believe her? She's an atheist. Oh, she was selfish. I don't really care. Because even quotes from people you don't like make sense sometimes. Even people you can't stand aren't always wrong. And one of the things that she said, which was very, very, I use the phrase inimitable, which means beyond compare, without argument. And she has a phrase which I use frequently, and it says, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequence of ignoring reality. What does she mean by that? Well, quite frankly, what she's stating is that you can basically ignore what's going on around you. But as the consequences of that behavior, whatever that may be, or the consequences unfold from whatever the events are that are happening around you, ultimately, they will affect you. I mean, they're going to affect you because, like Pericles said, you can ignore politics, but politics is not going to ignore you. Because if you're not involved, these people are still going to make the decisions, and those decisions are going to affect you. So you can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences that come about as a result of that reality. And we see things in here like the IRS targeting and being used as a weapon against the citizenry. We see things going on in our nation like the surveillance state being developed. We see things like the Supreme Court being asked to clarify what it means to bear arms. What does the Second Amendment say? Well, it says that you may keep and bear arms. So the Supreme Court has already established the word keep means that you can hold and possess weapons in your home. But they haven't parsed the word bear. Now, with all due respect, I got to tell you, the Supreme Court of the United States has declared itself I forgot the case. Anyway, the Supreme Court has declared itself to be the final arbiter of the Constitution and constitutional issues. I disagree with that principle. And the reason I do is because they are not, they can declare themselves self-appointed as the final arbiters, but they're not. I mean, with all due respect, they can sit there and try to define the language and divine the founder's intent with respect to the word bear. But frankly, I don't think they'll want to touch this one with a 10-foot pole. They've been asked to hear it. I think they're going to avoid it. And the reason I say that is if they state that it means you can carry a weapon, the left is going to go bonkers and have kittens. And if they don't, they'll run afoul of those people who, will want to add that crime to the list of crimes that they're going to charge them with at the end of all of this. Either way, you don't need 9 people to tell you that being judged by 12 is better than being carried by 6. I'm going to read you something that I think is important. And then I'm going to get into this issue of why you need to defend yourself. Quote, "You seem to consider the judges as the ultimate arbiters of all constitutional questions. It's a very dangerous doctrine indeed, and one which would place us under the despotism of an oligarchy. Our judges are as honest as other men, and not more so. They have, with others, the same passions for party, for power, and the privilege of their core. Their maxim," and this is in Latin and I'm not going to read it right, is "Boni judicis este ampliare jurisdictionem." And their power, the more dangerous, as they are in office for life, and not responsible, as the other functionaries are, to the elective control. The Constitution has erected no such single tribunal. Knowing that whatever hands confided with the corruptions of time and party, its members would become despots. It has more wisely made all the departments co-equal and co-sovereign within themselves. If the legislature fails to pass laws for a consensus, for paying the judges and other officers of government, for establishing a militia, for naturalization as prescribed in the Constitution, or if they fail to meet in Congress, the judges cannot issue their mandamus to them. If the president fails to supply the place of a judge, to appoint other civil or military officers, to issue requisite commissions, the justices cannot force him. They can issue their mandamus to no executive or legislative officer to enforce the fulfillment of their official duty, any more than the president or legislature may issue orders to the judges or their officers. Betrayed by English example, and unaware, as it should seem, of the control of our Constitution in this particular area, they have at times overstepped their limit by undertaking to command executive officers in the discharge of their executive duty. But the Constitution, in keeping 3 departments distinct and independent, restrains the authority of the judges to judiciary organs, as it does the executive and legislative to executive and legislative organs. The judges certainly have more frequent occasion to act on constitutional questions because the laws, because the laws of meum and tuum and of criminal action, forming the great mass of the system of law, constitute their particular department. When the legislative or executive functionaries act unconstitutionally, they are responsible to the people in their elective capacity. The exemption of the judges from that is quite dangerous enough. I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by educating. This is the true correction of abuses of constitutional power. pardon me, sir, for this difference of opinion. My personal interest in such questions is entirely extinct, but not my wishes for the longest possible continuance of our government on its pure principles. If the three powers maintain their mutual independence of each other, it may last long. But not so if either can assume the authorities of the other. I ask your candid reconsideration of this subject, and am sufficiently sure you will form a candid conclusion. From the writings of Thomas Jefferson. Now, why did I read that whole thing? Well, for starters, there were a number of very, very powerful statements in there, and there are a number of quotes that you've probably heard me use before, but in excerpted format. You've heard me say many times, you seem to consider the judges as the ultimate arbiters of all constitutional questions, which is a very dangerous doctrine indeed, and one which would place us under the despotism of an oligarchy. But sometimes it's helpful to hear things in their full context and to understand that that wasn't an isolated statement or a sentence that was just pulled out of the ether. That he went on to expound on his principle and the idea of what he was speaking about. And I apologize because my Latin is not acceptable. But to expound on that and to clearly declare the intent of what he thought and felt when he wrote the Constitution, along with all the other individuals, and signed it, and the numerous discussions and arguments and various, topics and fractures that went back and forth among the factions. We do know that Jefferson was perhaps he was a very prolific writer, but he was also perhaps one of the greatest thinkers of the time. He was truly a Renaissance man in many, many ways. And he utilized some very critical thinking, or some critical thinking principles and concepts in what he talked about and what he believed. And he generally put forth very, very qualified examples and arguments as to why he believed the way he did. Because with him, his knowledge wasn't superficial. It was grounded and thorough throughout the entire of his being. The entirety of his being. Sometimes when you have to talk for an hour and a half, you mangle some words, and I apologize if I do that from time to time. I wish I was as eloquent. I wish that my words carried the power and the meaning and the intent of Jefferson. I would be honored if during my lifetime I could even touch the brilliance and the honor and the integrity with which he approached this nation and its birth and its creation and its development and its growth and his intentions to see that last. You call them these people founding fathers or forefathers or I got to tell you something. There are not many people that were as dedicated to the cause of your freedom and your liberty and the success and the majesty of this nation as Jefferson. Whew. I mean, the guy is a titan among our founders. And he smelled and saw trouble on our horizon. In fact, he was clear about it repeatedly. He understood that we were embarked on some dangerous actions and moves. He understood that men were dangerous with power. In fact, he was the one who said, when all government, domestic and foreign, in little as in great, shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, It will render powerless the checks provided of one government on another. And we will become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. He saw and understood the future. The truth is, and I how do you even say this? But we as a nation are lost. I do believe that. I'm on the record as saying it. The reason I say it is because I've predicted, and I've said it before publicly, and I'll say it again, that I predict that this is going to come down to a fight. Not a fight that we choose. Not a fight that we desire. But this will be a fight, because the choice will be taken from us. The choice will not be ours. That these are things which we have no control over. You see, the fight is being generated not by you, not by me. It's not chosen by us. But it is being chosen by them. And you need to prepare to defend yourself. You'll notice the key operative word there is defend. Our government has already drawn first blood. Many times. And we have sat back and drawn that line in the sand and said, please, don't make us do this. And we have pleaded with them. And we have begged them. Please, don't make us take this action. But the stage has been set. And those people who desire this, they will have their way. And it kills me to hear it, and know it, and acknowledge it, and admit it. Because I know the cost of that to us. And I don't think the rest of you do. I don't mean you personally. But there are literally so many out there who have no idea. This is and was our nation. And these men who put all of their lives and their fortunes and their honor and their integrity and their beliefs, their families, their wealth, their position, their egos, their own personal desire on the line to create something that was great and brilliant and pure. How dare we squander that? How dare we not defend that? It's not our place to not defend that. Not just for ourselves. But I'm telling you that their intention is to bring this to a fight. And the proof is all around us. You can look at the evidence. You can see the intention in their actions, in their words, in their deeds. Yes, they put up opposing words to try to deflect your opinion and change your mind, to nudge you away from your truthful conclusion. The truth of the matter is, this is going to come down to a fight. And if you are responsible for yourself, if you are responsible for a family, if you are responsible for the lives and the welfare of your children or your grandchildren, you should be prepared. Those of you who don't have those familial responsibilities, you should understand that your preparation is just as necessary, because you owe it to those who've come before you and those who will come after. You owe it to your neighbors and your friends. You owe it to this republic, which has given you everything that you have. You owe it for the benefit of continuation. You owe it because that is the honorable thing to do. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about this National Guard issue. The Ohio National Guard is training for right-wing Second Amendment terrorists. Does that make you a terrorist or a freedom fighter? Ask yourself that question. Seen over time these various proofs appear. We saw it here in Missouri with the MAIC debacle. Been watching and listening as our nation is poised to go to war with itself. Today, or yesterday I should say, the news came out that the Ohio National Guard has been using a training regimen that envisions right-wing terrorism. And in our last segment, we talked a little bit about preparing to defend yourself, and I want you to understand what you're preparing to defend yourself from. There was a training exercise that was conducted last January in a mock disaster where Second Amendment supporters with, quote, anti-government opinions were portrayed as domestic terrorists. They didn't use the concept of some anti-American foreign group or entity, state-sponsored or otherwise, who might have snuck across our border. No. They wanted this to be realistic. And the truth is, they can't get more real than training for what they really expect. There's an old military adage out there. Train as you fight as you train. And it says a lot about their way of thinking. If they're training as they intend to fight, and fighting as they intend to train, then they told us who they believe and perceive to be the enemy. This isn't the first time we've heard this. But again, it adds to the mountain of empirical evidence. And I use the word empirical because it is synonymous with undeniable. This is the empirical proof that the real intentions of this government, and this incorporates your state governments, is to declare the citizens of this nation the enemy. In fact, they've already done so. We've got a president, and not just this one, but prior presidents, including George Bush before him, who have made it clear that if you will not, as a member of the military, sign a statement stating that you would fire on Americans if so ordered, that you are not welcome. You have a governor of the state of New York who came out and said, if you are a gun owner or a Second Amendment supporter, that you're not welcome in New York. There's no place for you. And that was his verbatim statement, not mine. This civil support team, the Ohio National Guard 52nd Civil Support Team, this training incorporated a plot from a local school district whose employees used biological weapons to advance their belief about, quote, protecting gun rights and Second Amendment rights. So, let me get this straight. You are utilizing an exercise in which you're stating that, first of all, a local school district and the employees within that would use biological weapons to defend gun rights and Second Amendment rights. There's a bit of a dichotomy in that thinking because most local school district employees are not generally, in a lot of places, Second Amendment supporters. So, that's a little like asking. That's a little like writing a scenario that says that Christian churches are going to flock together to demand that abortion be allowed and fight a war over it. I don't see that happening. The chief of police of Portsmouth, his name is Bill Raisin, he told the local news channel that the drill accurately represented, quote, the reality of the world we live in. Adding in that this kind of training, quote, helps us all be prepared. Well, with all due respect to Mr. Raisin, this is a bit of a skewed worldview. Secondarily, you don't generally see Second Amendment supporters taking violent action. Quite frankly, if all of the Second Amendment supporters were as dangerous as they're purported to be, there wouldn't be any anti-Second Amendment supporters out there, would there? I mean, it stands to reason that if all of these bloodthirsty gun owners were as dangerous as they've been declared to be, there wouldn't be any anti-gun people left. See, the truth is that the left is far more likely to utilize violence than the right. And the reason I say that is because time has shown us, historically, that people who are the most predisposed to utilize violence are not those people who have the capacity and the wherewithal to actually accomplish it utilizing a weapon. The truth is that the Second Amendment has nothing to do with offensive action against our government. The truth is that the Second Amendment was clearly outlined to be a last resort to prevent the nation being lost to tyranny and to enable the citizenry to defend itself against a government who would come against those citizens, declaring them to be an enemy of the state. In this scenario that they created here for the Ohio National Guard, 2 junior high school employees poisoned school lunches with mustard gas, acting on orders from a, quote, white nationalist leader, a fictional William Pierce. In the scenario, the Ohio National Guard discovered biological weapons being produced in the school, requiring the activation of containment and decontamination procedures. The participants located documents expressing school employees', quote, anti-government sentiment, as well as some paperwork that identified the fictional Mr. Pierce as the right-wing terrorist's fictional leader. Now, it's interesting that some time ago, last year, the Ohio National Guard and their civil support unit conducted a similar mock drill that involved left-wing terrorists last year in Athens, Ohio. And it's kind of even more interesting because the people who were involved in that particular scenario demanded an apology. They were livid that they would be characterized in such a fashion. Now, I'm sure that the Ohio National Guard's argument would be, see, last time we did it involving left-wing terrorists, and this time we did it with right-wing terrorists because we have to plan for all inevitabilities. You can couch it any way you like. And I frankly don't care which ideological side of the fence you sit. But I got to tell you, any scenario in which you're conducting a drill that characterizes American citizens as terrorists, killing innocent people to make a message understood or to coerce government action, is not one that I really see as realistic. I mean, this isn't Fallujah. This isn't Sochi. Americans of both political ideological sides of the fence, I don't believe, consider killing innocents to make a political point or to draw attention to their political scenario a legitimate exercise. I don't believe that most Americans, irrespective of their ideological position, would be willing to kill innocent people, women, children, school students, to make their voice heard, or to incite terror into a government which, frankly, we're all terrified of. It's interesting that this area where they went to this, in Athens County Emergency Management Group, they were upset where they did this training on the left-wing side. The Athens County Emergency Management Agency and the Athens County Local Emergency Planning Commission are issuing this release to apologize for our choice of scenario, said a news release. The scenario caused distress to people who have spent countless hours striving to front a tyrant with the facts. The Ohio National Guard Communications Director, a guy by the name of James Sims, he suggested that Media Tracker, which is the author of the article, was inferring from the ONG document contents as opposed to what's actually in the report. However, after the excerpts were read to him, Sims responded that they weren't relevant. Okay, I'm going to stop you there, he said. I'm going to quit this conversation. You have a good day. Well, the truth of the matter is, you see, this reminds me, to a certain extent, of that meeting that occurred yesterday in reference to Common Core over in Willow Springs, where the moment that you make a point that completely and utterly undermines the premise, the pretext, the concept, the foundation of actions which are against the best interest of those involved by a representative or someone in a position of authority, the conversation has to cease. Buckeye Firearms Association spokesman, a guy by the name of Chad Bouse, said, quote, "It is a scary day indeed when law enforcement are being trained that Second Amendment advocates are the enemy. The revelation of this information is appalling to me and to all citizens of Ohio who are true conservatives and patriots, who don't have guns for any other reason than that the Second Amendment gives them that right." In 2009, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security warned law enforcement agencies in writing that a predicted rise in, quote, right-wing extremism would be fueled by, quote, proposed imposition of firearms restrictions and weapons bans, and, quote, the election of the first African-American president. Well, let's understand what they just said there. In 2009, DHS came out and told law enforcement agencies, in no uncertain terms, as a warning, an alert from their higher up, that the predicted rise in right-wing extremism would be fueled by proposed imposition of firearms restrictions and weapons bans, which they apparently knew were coming then, huh? Isn't that interesting? And the election of the first African-American president. Well, with all due respect, this particular American black man, who's half white, so he's not African-American. In fact, quite honestly, he's really not American at all, but whatever. The truth is, this half-white guy, half-black guy, extremism fueled by the election of the man. Been a lot of rhetoric, but almost all of it deserved. When you have a guy who operates completely lawlessly, when you have an individual who doesn't take the constitutional prohibitions of the executive office and adhere to them, quite frankly, that has nothing to do with the color of his skin. And I would suggest and posit the idea that the rhetoric that was thrown around about Bush was far more aggressive than the rhetoric thrown around about Obama. And if George Bush, and I'm not defending George Bush in any way at all. He was another traitor, by the way. So let's not get caught up in the, I'm completely independent. Both the Republican and the Democrat parties are traitors. Did you hear what I said? Traitors. Spell it. But had George Bush done what this president is doing, had he made unilateral decisions and done executive orders like this president is doing, you would have had the most bombastic threats, the most terroristic threats, and quite frankly, perhaps some of the most terroristic actions by the left. You've not seen any of that from the right. You've not seen any individuals who have come out and made statements against the health and safety of the man. I mean, you may get an occasional knucklehead who does something really stupid, probably speaking without thinking. But you haven't seen any attempts on the life of the president. You haven't seen any extremist or terrorist attacks aimed at interfering with his rule or reign. In fact, I mean, interestingly enough, it appears that he operates with complete immunity and impunity. In fact, I'm quite frankly surprised that there haven't been more people who have expressed the fact that this president's actions are unacceptable in a constitutional republic. Throughout all of the history of modern civilization, I want you to go back and I want you to do a little bit of homework. And I want you to look at the ideological slant, the leanings of those individuals who have been responsible for domestic terrorism and or acts against their own nation and their own people. And I want you to just, for argument's sake, with an open mind, look at their ideological stance. Almost always, it comes from totalitarians and elitists who believe that big government should control every aspect of life. That's not a principle of the right. That's a principle of the left. Soviet Russia, the rise of communism, the rise of socialism, the world envelopment of socialism and communism, totalitarianism, fascism. Can you show me one example where that's been a right-wing extremism? Don't say the Nazis. They were totalitarians. Big government all the way. Thought so. Because the right wing says big government's the wrong direction. And only tyrants believe in big government. The truth is, the Ohio National Guard should be ashamed of itself. And any member of the Ohio National Guard who's listening to this, who participated in this exercise, you all ought to figure out how you're going to get out of that organization, or what you're going to do from the inside when the poop hits the fan. Because the simple truth is this: there will come a time when the brown stuff is going to hit the oscillating wooden blades, and you're going to have to make a choice. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. Please make sure that you visit, support, and patronize our sponsors. You can do that by going to Wits End Classic Barbershop on the square in West Plains, along with Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop. If you have a legal issue, please visit the law offices of Jason Henry at 417-256-4100. Make sure that you visit our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard, and also our friends over on Porter Wagoner Boulevard at Mini Mart Express 1. Mini Mart Express 2 is located up on the junction of Route 14 and 63 in Old Granny's Cafe building. They have a drive-thru at both locations. Please utilize those. And also our friends over at Battery Station. Please make sure that you visit their website at batterystation.com. And you can also call them at 417-257-7799. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll see you tomorrow morning. God bless.